Happy Wednesday. Get ready for another Going Behind the Point Spread brought to you by Betfred Sports. I'm Travis Justice. We're going to be joined momentarily by Scott Spreitzer and Dr. Rob Zatechka. But first, let's kind of take you through the night as it's becoming quite a regular routine. Don't forget you can get a free bet with Betfred Sports by downloading the brand new Betfred Sports app on the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. Download the Sportsbook app, create a new account, use the promo code DocTalk, and you get yourself a $20 free bet that's available in Arizona, Colorado, and Iowa. So make sure to do that and check out the great sports app that it is. Don't forget, tonight's show is for entertainment purposes only. We're here to have a little bit of fun, talk college football, and of course the wonderful world that is the gambling aspect of college football. And if you do have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. That's 1-800-GAMBLER. If you don't follow us on social media, please do so. Our YouTube channel is growing by leaps and bounds, and we appreciate you for that. Just look for Doc Talk Sports. Same on Facebook. You can follow Dr. Rob on Twitter at Doc Talk Sports. And if you want to follow me, you can at Travis Creates. This is a call-in show. We take live call-ins. However, we haven't taken one yet. Don't be scared. Don't be shy. That number is for you to call, and we actually have a call screener sitting up there ready to take your calls. He's been sitting here each and every show waiting to take a call, and he still hasn't taken one. So 402-543-5556. It's 402-543-5556. You're going to be hearing from Scott Spreitzer. He's a good friend of mine. He's a good friend of Dr. Rob's. I've known him for almost 20 years now. You can see his stuff on docsports.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Scott Wins. And if you want to work with Scott, check this out. Just text Doc Talk to 29022. Now you're going to be wondering, well, what does that get you? Well, you're going to get a little link, and you're going to get Scott's daily free pick videos, as well as a page where you can sign up and get $60 in Scott's premium member only picks. So, and joining us right now is the one, the only Scott Spreitzer and Dr. Rob Zatechka. Hello, gentlemen.
How's it going, Travis? How's it going, Doc?
What are you drinking there, Doc?
And I'm like breaking ranks here a little bit. I'm going with the competitor, little pint 9.
Okay, no, there's nothing wrong. You're not breaking ranks. I do have a question for you because my son's confused upstairs. Owen's the producer of the show. He's the call screener of the show. And he texted me right before we went on the air. He goes, YouTube says this is week 2. This is our 3rd show. And see, I fell into the trap of that week 0, week 1, week 2. Should I be calling this week 2? Or should I be calling this week 3? That's the hard question I'm in right now. What should I be doing?
Week 3, but I'm one of these guys that hates the whole week 0 thing.
I'm kind of with you, Rob. So next week we're just going to call it week 4, and it'd be like we skipped week 3 and it didn't even exist.
Yeah, we're telling the college football media, screw you.
A big F you to week 0. Scott, how you been this week? And I was thinking about you today. I was in Iowa City for a little bit, just looking at Kinnick Stadium, getting ready for the big Cyhawk series, which we're going to be talking about a little bit later on. How much time during the week do you put in to college football, or just in getting ready for the week?
Yeah, it starts Sunday afternoons before the lines come out, generally speaking. In fact, now that we've got week 1 of NFL starting, I will be Saturday nights. I get home from doing a show at the Circa Hotel about 10 p.m. And I've already got my NFL done, all that kind of stuff earlier in the week. But I start looking at the final scores from Saturday's college football. And I've already done my numbers. By week 3, next week, I'll have started doing my numbers after we've got a couple of the college games under our belt a week in advance. So, for instance, for week 4, I'll have my numbers out before the week 3 games are played. That keeps me off of, obviously, of putting too much into how one team played in one particular game. It gives you that whole season-long feel of a team. And so I'll start looking at those compared to, jot them all down, compared to where I think the numbers are going to move. That's Saturday night. And then generally speaking, during the daytime on Sunday, you'll start seeing numbers popping up for the next week of college football. And I would say grand total Saturday night, Sunday afternoon, about 4 or 5 hours. That starts it. And then it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, getting info, finding spots, all that kind of stuff after that. It's a full-time job and then some, Travis.
In the old days, you'd have to go down to the Marley Bone on Leavenworth and grab your sheet out of the little pickle card machine. Now you just grab your phone, you drive over to the state of Iowa, you download and you get on the Betfred app and you make your bets. My question is, before we dive into the 4 games that we're going to take a look at, do you make bet if a line comes out, or when do you make your bets? Do you say, hey, I got value here, I better jump on it now? Because I want you to tell people, hey, Do you wait till Saturday beforehand, or do you do it on Thursday, Friday, Wednesday? When do you do it?
I usually have my first, I would say, 3 or 4 bets on average by the time we're starting to watch that NBC Sunday night NFL game. So by the time that one's kicking off, I've already made 3 or 4 bets for the next week's college football. Then I kind of kick back a bit. I'm kind of one of those guys who takes Monday off almost. And by taking Monday off, it means I work about a half a day. I just like to get away from it a little bit. So it goes from there. It just starts throughout the week. Now, by Thursday afternoons is basically when I've set my card. Every once in a while, there'll be a game that pops up because a quarterback got hurt in practice and it wasn't announced until maybe Thursday afternoon or Friday, or just simply line moves. If I like a line that's, let's say, I like a team that's, +3 or more, and I refuse to play them at anything less than 3, and they're 3 on Saturday morning all of a sudden because of some bets on the favorite, I'll jump in and bet then. So I tell you what, 95% of my bets are done and in the books by Thursday nights for Saturday. And I add a couple by Saturday afternoon, Saturday night, depending on the games. In no way, and I'll tell this people right now, do I add a bet because I had a bad Saturday afternoon and want the bailout game in Hawaii. That's asking for trouble. So I'm telling people that right now. I only like the bailout game if I like the bailout game. You know what I mean?
Oh, man. Well, let's dive into our first game of the week, shall we? We're going to go to this one. It's going to be UAB at Liberty. Now, people are probably wondering, why aren't you doing the big games? Why aren't you doing, Texas, Alabama? Well, because we're trying to give you value. We're trying to give you, we're trying to help you along. We want you to make a little bit of money. UAB at Liberty. I don't know why I'm surprised UAB is a 6-point favorite, because Hugh Freeze has had some pretty good teams at Liberty. So take me through this.
Yeah, this is a bet also that I made a little bit earlier this week. And in fact, it was as low as 4.5. It's now 6. I still think 6 is okay if you like the Blazers here. But we made this bet earlier in the week. No more Malik Willis, obviously, for Liberty. He's off to the NFL. The next in line is Charlie Brewer at quarterback for the Flames, but he got hurt in last week's game. He's going to miss this one. Now, both backups did see plenty of snaps last week for Liberty, and they they escaped against Southern Miss. It was a triple overtime game, and that came with Southern Miss turning the ball over 5 times, yet they had to go to triple overtime to win that football game. And Southern Miss isn't a good football team right now, guys, and of course the Flames needed to score a touchdown pass of about 25 yards in the final 30 seconds of regulation to get to that first overtime. It's a game they probably should have lost, and it looked like they were out of sorts once Charlie Brewer went down. So you basically got what would constitute second and third string quarterbacks at best seeing snaps in this game. And then UAB is a good football team. They got a little bit of revenge on their side too, if you're into that whole revenge thing, which can tend to be overvalued and overrated a little bit in sports. But remember last year they opened up their new stadium and they got hammered. They were embarrassed by Liberty. So that's going to stick in their minds a little bit. It's a circle the calendar game. Now, that's not why I would jump on a team. I just happened to make this line 8. It was as low as 4.5. It's still sitting around 6, 6.5. So, I would lower my wager, but UAB would still be a play at this point. But again, Liberty's going through some changes, quarterback injury, offensive line not what it was, and I just saw them struggle against a pretty bad Southern Miss team.
Dr. Rob, I want to bring into this conversation because Liberty's UAB is kind of fascinating to me. Think about it. Was this 5 years ago? Their program was axed. They got rid of football. They didn't play a season. Boosters go effing crazy. They bring it back, and they really haven't missed a beat. Does that surprise you that you're able to rebound and play as well as they have with missing a season and canceling your whole team?
Well, it is. I mean, especially if you kind of consider it. I mean, let's go back in time a little bit to where the NC2A put the death penalty on
SMU
Methodist. I mean, that was considered a death knell, and I mean that program was destroyed for the better part of 2 decades. And so when you see a team now where you see, and you see it in different spots here. I mean, and at different levels where a school start a program and within a few years they're playing some really, really good football. I think in this day and age, it's not as hard to do that, especially with the transfer portal. And if you've got some alumni that are willing to chip in some money, you can kind of get things going pretty quickly. And that's probably a benefit of NIL, I think, is that it's not like Alabama Birmingham's one of these schools that has massive NIL money, but the little bit that I'm sure they do have, they put to good use, and you can kind of turn things around really quickly with that and the portal.
Just to let you both know, I'm here, but my camera is just like.
Oh,
I'm gonna have to add myself, and I'm just gonna be a black hole. I'm the invisible man. I have no idea why my camera went black, but I'll try to get it fixed. Let's go on to the next game, and this one is an interesting game to me, Scott, because the downfall of Colorado has just been stunning to me, just absolutely stunning.
Oh, absolutely. That should be, by the way, that spread, Air Force 17.
Oh, sorry.
But no, I was just going to say, so people know that, Iowa didn't get bet up 14 points against Iowa State.
You can tell where Trav's mind is at.
Yeah. I saw an ESPN guy the other day. This is why, like, I'm not going to try to do Dr. Rob's job, and why I see, like, a guy like Joey Galloway who shouldn't be talking point spreads. I don't know if you guys caught that the other day. He took a lot of heat, as ESPN tends to do. But he talked about that Alabama line moving from 17 to 20. And he goes, oh, by the weekend, it'll probably be 30. Are you kidding me? This is why you stick to talking play-by-play and analyzing plays. And you were great at what you did as a player. But, let the point spreads go to the guys who do this for a living.
Scott, what do you expect? He's an Ohio State guy.
There you go. Absolutely. I love that. Buckeye guy. What do you expect? Hardest nut to crack, I guess, between the years, too. But anyway, you look at this battle, and I'm sitting there going, man, can you imagine Dr. Rob, Colorado, a 17-point underdog to Air Force, just a decade ago or so. And I think Karl Dorrell's obviously in a lot of trouble. The program's hit the skids. I bet them under their wins total before the season, which was 3.5 wins. That's all they were expected to get to if they do. So I got a lot of plays this week, but this is one that I made earlier, and it was a good 3 points lower than it is now. But you couldn't ask for a better matchup advantage. I can make this simple as far as why I bet Air Force. And it's more than just the fact that Colorado's program has hit the skids. What does Air Force want to do? Well, they want to run the football, and they do it well. They rolled Northern Iowa last week. They gained 582 yards on nearly 10 yards per pop. Colorado, meanwhile, takes on a banged-up TCU school. The Horned Frogs run for 275 yards on 9.8 yards per carry. That's just crazy stuff. Only took them 28 carries to get 275 yards against this Buffalo's defense. So I think what you're going to see is Air Force doing what they want. They're going to run the football up and down the field against a bad Buffalo's defense. Karl Dorrell doesn't seem to have this team on any page at all as far as being on the same page is concerned on either side of the line of scrimmage. The talent level has dropped immensely. And Air Force beat this team just last time they played 3 years ago. They beat them by a final score of 30-23. Air Force is a much better team than they were then. Colorado, as I mentioned, they're the dregs right now in the Pac-12. So went ahead and laid the points here with Air Force. I think they probably win by 3 touchdowns.
Rob, does it, and again, I apologize. I'm in a black hole. You can no longer see me. Does it surprise you, and you and I talked about this a little bit on the podcast, that Colorado's just been an absolute disaster? I mean, I go back to the 94 game when we had Cordell Stewart and Rashawn Salam and the game you played in at Memorial Stadium. Just trying to figure out where it all went wrong. Did it go wrong with Rick Neuheisel? Did it go wrong with Gary Barnett? Did it go wrong with who was the guy from Boise? Dan Hawkins. From where did it go wrong with Colorado? And why can't they win?
And kind of it's one of those things. Let's go back to UAB, Alabama Birmingham there. If you look at a school now, people are going to use this argument against me, but in general, if you've got a school with good administrative support and you've got good alumni support, you can do some really great things. And Alabama Birmingham showed that. Colorado lacks 2 things. They lack administrative support and they lack fan support. You can have some really great coaches there, but if they just don't have the resources they need to build a program, you're going to have some trouble there. Now, I know everybody's going to use that argument against me in the sense that, well, Nebraska's got outstanding administrative support and great fan support. We've been, kind of dragging the bottom of the barrel here, but I think that's a little bit of an outlier situation. I think Nebraska's one coach away from turning things around. Now, I've been saying that since they fired Pelini, but I think the biggest thing there at Colorado is just you don't have that support. Recruits see that. Recruits understand that. And I watched – it was the TCU Colorado game this past weekend, and it was mind-blowing to me looking at just the lack of quality of play and quality of talent across the board for that team.
All right, the next game, and I mentioned I was in Iowa City today. I was sitting right there by Kinnick Stadium. They're getting ready for the big Cy-Hawk series. Iowa State taking on Iowa. Iowa surprisingly a 3.5-point favorite. Iowa State at plus 150 on the money line. There's no value in either one of these. The over under at 40.5. That I'm interested in that over under number, Scott.
Yeah, 40.5. Are they playing 7 quarters? I mean, somebody tell the Hawkeyes there's an easier way to get to 7. I mean, my gosh. I'm watching that game last week. We talked about that game last week. And I was saying at the end of the show or at the end of the analysis on that game that it kind of looked like a 24-16 type of game, that Iowa was going to win. It wouldn't be easy. South Dakota State, is going to be up for this game, and they're a very good FCS program. But to see them almost lose the game outright, if not for a couple of safeties, it's pretty scary and pretty telling about where this offense is. And so I look at this and I'm thinking, all right, all they've done all week long is taken heat. Kirk Ferentz, the Hawkeye program, the Hawkeye offense, all they have done is take heat. I went back and I looked at my numbers for this game that I made before last week's games were played. And I made it 5.5, Iowa, of course, being the favorite. So really, as far as I'm concerned, in my ratings, and Iowa could come out here and lose this game outright, but the bottom line is betting value is what I'm all about. And to me, there's no real value in Iowa State in this game from a point spread betting perspective, because power ratings, my power ratings, other guys who I trust in this industry for 20 plus years, all had the Hawkeyes anywhere from 4 to 5.5 points better than Iowa State on this field. And so now you're seeing 3.5 because of what happened in that one game against South Dakota State. This is a great example as to why you make numbers in advance of a game for the next couple of weeks. It keeps you from overreacting. Now, having said that, I don't know that it's that much of an overreaction. We saw Iowa wrap up their season last year. We saw them all season long punt the ball 7-8 times a game and rely on turnovers and defense, which they did again here. Yeah, their special teams are great. 7 punts down inside the 20 or whatever. The defense was great. They held South Dakota State to 2 yards per play. But how can we trust the Hawkeyes to get to 14? Seriously, Iowa State's got some newbies. They've got some holes. We don't know exactly how good they are because of who they played. Southeast Missouri State, man, the Red Hawks, they're no jackrabbits. I'm just going to say that, and I'm not kidding. That's not a good program at that level. But Hunter Decker looked good. But again, now he's got to go up against a whole different animal because he's got to see this fierce defense. I just think it's going to be one of those games that's going to be nip and tuck. Iowa probably wins like 17 to some odd score of 17 to 12, 17-13 in that neighborhood, which is a little bit too close to the line. But again, the value, as far as the number is concerned, does lie with the Hawkeyes.
I don't know why that surprised me, especially coming after the Spencer Petras performance, right? And David's even coming in on Facebook, says Thompson better than Petras. He's talking about Casey Thompson from Nebraska. I won't argue with that. There's no arguing with that. But here's the problem where I have the 3.5, and take me through the betting value here, because Spencer Petras was not good. The offensive line is all over the place, and which is surprising for an Iowa team. Nico Regani's out. Keegan Johnson's going to be out again, and you don't know if Gavin Williams, the running back, is going to play. So when you're missing that many guys, does that value kind of decrease, or is this something you just stay away from in general?
When you stink, how many players does it take to actually matter that are missing from a game? And that's basically what you got with this Iowa offense. I'm not trying to be a
no, you're right,
but it's true. I mean, I always say when guys will say, this guy's out, that guy's out, or this team gave up 450 yards per game last year on defense, but they bring back 8. Great, they brought back 8 guys who gave up 450 yards per game last season, and the coaching staff is still the same. Maybe they'll be a little bit better, but until I see them play better, I can't jump in on something like that. So that's the thing, is like they've already were at rock bottom kind of. So I don't think it hurts them. Not going to help them, but it doesn't hurt them by those guys that you mentioned that are a little bit banged up. As far as the Cyclones, they're just a mystery right now, which is while I said Iowa has the value as a better, I can't jump in here because we didn't see Iowa State play anybody yet. We saw Iowa play an excellent FCS program that could win the FCS this season and would probably have gone into Lincoln and beaten Nebraska last week for those that in our Husker land watching this. So Iowa played a very good opponent last week. That doesn't give an excuse for the way the offense played, but still, at least we kind of know what they're made of. We know they're going to do well on special teams. We know they're going to play well on defense. We don't quite know what we're going to get out of the Cyclones yet.
Yeah, when your punter punts 10 times and he's like the hero of the game,
He punted well.
He did punt well because he's an Aussie. He's an Australian, right? I mean, he's just – and by the way, I'm not kidding. You don't have to be an Iowa fan to appreciate this. Listen to Tory Taylor interviews. The dude has a clear future in broadcasting if he wants to. He's got that Australian accent, and he's an older dude. He's like in his mid-20s, and he just doesn't care. He just speaks his mind, and he's one of the best interviews you'll hear in college sports if you get a chance to hear Tory Taylor speak. All right, the final game we're going to be talking about is, of course, the Nebraska game. Georgia Southern taking on the Huskers. Nebraska 23.5-point favorite. Look at that money line in Georgia Southern, plus 1290, and the over-under at 63, Scott.
Yeah, I keep looking at this Nebraska team, and I'm like, I can't lay 23.5. I mean, I think Rob mentioned it last week. We talked a little bit about, we were comparing to North Dakota going to Utah last year, being in the game in the first half, then getting their doors blown off in the second half. They were in this game, obviously, 7-7, Husker boo-birds, and the crowd's going like crazy at halftime. Even Scott Frost just coming out and say, it ain't good, or whatever he said at that halftime interview. And then, of course, they come out in the second half. They change things up a bit. They're like, hey, we're bigger and we're stronger and we're more talented than these guys. Let's run the football. And they got things done. But, Georgia Southern is going to be an interesting preparation game for this team this week because they're going up against a team that's completely changing what they do or what they've done. This was a run the football team, and now they're looking to transition to a passing team. And they did pretty well at it last week. Here's an interesting stat for you guys. Over 75% of the tickets written on this game thus far are on Georgia Southern. People have bailed on Nebraska as far as, the average bettor walking into the books in Las Vegas are concerned. Now, that's when I kind of start thinking, all right, maybe it's time to sit back and pass on a Nebraska game because everybody's against them now after everybody was on them 2 weeks ago going into that Northwestern game. But I look at Georgia Southern. They played Morgan State. Even Nebraska right now would hang 55 on Morgan State. And so I see this and I'm going, it's all going to be about this defense. Can you stop a passing game that is going to fire up a ton of passes as opposed to what they used to do? And if you can get some kind of legitimate, consistent pass rush against Georgia Southern. I think through the first half, I don't know, guys, did they have a single sack, against North Dakota through the first 2 quarters of that game? Maybe they had one. It's just ugly. It's no pressure on these quarterbacks. So Georgia Southern, I would not be shocked if they hang this number. I told you a couple of games I got plays on. I'm not ducking the question on whether you like Iowa State or Nebraska, Georgia Southern, but there's like 70 games, and there's much better spots than Georgia Southern, Nebraska this week.
And I think people need to understand it. Scott's not always betting the games we're talking about. We talk about Iowa because, I'm an Iowa fan. We talk about Nebraska because Talk Sports is predominantly about Nebraska. So we focus on those games just to see where he's coming from. David does want to know, is Georgia Southern the 2022 version of the 2018 Troy?
God, that was a painful game.
I mean, Troy won against Nebraska in Lincoln, right?
Yeah, and Rob, I got to ask you something real quick because you played on some extremely talented, well-coached football teams. And one of the questions that I had people asking me about this game is Nebraska going to be looking ahead to the game against Oklahoma? But don't you have to be consistent and confident to even think about looking ahead? I mean, how could this team look ahead? They got to take care of business 1 quarter at a time.
At this point, I mean, because you talked about that game being tied early on last week, it was 17-17 in the third quarter.
Right.
It's not like North Dakota came out and just rolled over in the second half. They came out for the better part of the third quarter. That was still a dogfight, and North Dakota was in that game. So here's a question. So Eric throws out the question: Is 23.5 too much in terms of a spread here? So here I got a question. This is something I've kind of thought about all week. I say all week. 3.5 days since watching Nebraska play. Going back to what was the final spread at kickoff for the North Dakota game? Do you remember?
It was about 23, right around
Okay,
there.
I thought it was about the same. I thought it was right in that 22, 23 range. When you're looking at a spread like that against a team like Nebraska going against a lower division team, you got a big spread. And in my mind, I think there's kind of 2 scenarios that can play out here. Either A, Nebraska comes out, just smokes them right off the bat, jumps out to a 38-7 lead, and then puts all their backups in, and North Dakota comes back and chips away at that lead because Nebraska's getting their younger guys in, getting all the backups in, and you walk out of there saying, well, Nebraska blew them out, but they pulled all their starters, and so the win was probably a better win than what the final score showed. Nebraska beat them worse than the final score showed. That's not what happened. Now, it's still a 21-point win, but that's not what happened.
Right.
What happened was North Dakota hung with Nebraska for the better part of 3 quarters and then finally ran out of gas. Nebraska got what, frankly, I don't want to call it a lucky play, but it was a great play, late third quarter. Casey Thompson makes a 31-yard throw to Trey Palmer, and actually it was 99% Trey Palmer just going up, high pointing the ball and making a great catch with a 2 or 3 guys all around him. That was what put Nebraska in a position to jump up to the 31-17 lead. It kept that drive going, but North Dakota had Nebraska pinned deep with only a 7-point lead. So you've got these 2 scenarios. The early blowout, yank the starters, the inferior team chips away against the third stringers to make the score a little bit closer. The other one is the inferior team sits in there and trades punches for 3 quarters before they finally just tire out because they don't have the depth that Nebraska has. When you're looking at a spread, do you take scenarios like that into account? I mean, do you look at this and go like, okay, I don't see Nebraska nuking these guys. I think they just got enough depth and pull away late. I mean, you can get to that score one of 2 ways. Does that come into account when you're figuring these point spreads?
Absolutely. I'll give you an example from the best football program in the last decade plus, which is Alabama. I mean, my gosh, this team tears into teams in the first half. It seems like everybody that played, they're up 35-3 if it's a team not named Georgia at halftime. And they're always laying a bunch of points, like this week 20. They're 11 in the first half against Texas. I would much rather back Alabama minus 11 in the first half because Nick Saban, everybody likes to rip Saban. They call him Nick Satan out here and things like that. They like to rip him.
I love Saban.
So do I. I mean, from his breakfast that he eats the same thing every day for 30 years to everything he does, And so I'm a big Saban fan. I'm a big disciplinarian fan. And so what he does, though, and I'm going to say this, and people are going to go, oh, come on, you're calling him a class act. Well, guess what? After halftime, he does dial it down. And he usually puts in backups. He might have a guy that's playing for the Heisman, who's at the top of the Heisman list, that he pulls out midway through the third quarter in these games. So what I'm getting long-winded about, and I didn't mean to, is that, yes, I factor that stuff in. And what you just said about Nebraska, they could come out and be up 21-0 after 1 quarter of play if they get their crap together. They could also be struggling at halftime. If they're up big, I would think, here's the one thing I was going to say, and I don't know Scott Frost. Never talked to him, never met him. Big fan of him as a quarterback, obviously, in the 90s. But the bottom line is, if I'm Scott Frost, I don't care if I'm up 38-0 at halftime. I'm playing my guys well into the second half because of the way things have gone these first 2 games. I don't want to give these guys too much time off. I might start pulling guys at the end of 3 if they're up big, but I'm not going to do it late third quarter, mid third quarter, because these guys got to be ready to go for that next opponent in the rest of the season. So you're spot on. When you got these teams like Nebraska who are not very good, or at least not accomplishing what everybody thinks they should be doing with the level of talent they have, you have to factor that stuff in about what could the score be at halftime, what are they going to do in the second half, and that's just one of the reasons that I passed this game. And Georgia Southern is an unknown factor. Nebraska should go out and win this game 35-10. The bottom line is we don't trust Nebraska anymore as bettors. I saw somebody asked a question about how many wins do you think Nebraska will have by the end of the year. That's a very tough. Their over-under was 7.5 before losing to Northwestern. It's obviously a situation where what are they probably going to be 2-1 after Saturday if they don't completely collapse. 2-2 after Oklahoma in all likelihood. I don't know, maybe 4 wins. I mean,
wow.
The problem is if they lose big to Oklahoma, if a Georgia Southern shocks them, don't their heads go in the toilet after that, so to speak? I mean, where do you draw from? Hey, we're 2-2. And it's like the rest of the season is almost shot.
4 wins would do well. He wouldn't last to the rest of the season if it's only looking like 4 wins. That
October 1st is the buyout cutoff.
Yeah, the October 1st date is looming large for sure. These half hours fly by, but before we let you go, Scott, I mean, really, I'm like, well, maybe we should be doing an hour, but no. But the good thing is we're not like under hard broadcast times. But I always ask you for one crazy stat. So if you have that one crazy stat, because Scott's got this analytical mind, he's like a database, and he always comes up with some really cool shit that I love to hear about. So
I think last week though, Travis, we went on the biggest, scariest roller coaster at the amusement park right out of the gate. So
I would agree.
Going to be tough to top that. But by the way, we talked about how none of the games finished within a half point of the closing spread. And then like the first 3 games of the week finished within a half point of the closing spread. I mean, this stuff changes all the time. But I will say this, and this will change. Season to date, before any of these games get underway this week, the favorites are 81-13 straight up in college football, 81-13. They're 53-41 against the spread. That's going to change. So if you're betting just to win $100, you're up $790 right now, blindly betting favorites against the spread. You're up almost 8 full units already. But dogs, as I just mentioned, on the flip side, 13-81 straight up thus far. And I tell people until this starts to change, don't play hero. You like a team that's getting 6 points, don't go out there and try to max profits and win, $400 on a $100 bet because of the money line. Take the 6 points. These teams aren't winning right now outright. Grab those points. They're covering spreads enough to where you can kind of help your money out a little bit by doing that and not killing your bankroll. I will say this, though. Within a few weeks, we're going to be talking about underdogs covering like crazy, I'm sure, against favorites. And the books adjust real fast. So be careful if you're betting chalk.
So, Scott, is that something we should follow like every beginning of college football season? Bet the favorites in those first couple of weeks because – or is that not a trend we know yet?
I wouldn't say it's a blanket effect, but what tends to happen is you get – not so much this year, although we've seen a few – we've seen a few of these conference games, kicking things off. Northwestern Nebraska. We've seen over the weekend conference teams playing each other. Big games in the first game of the season. And usually what we see are good football teams or Power 5 football teams trying to get that win against scrubs. And so you see these 81-13 records by the favorites, and then they get into conference play, and then it's, what happens is the books will adjust a little bit for the betting public. You've got closer match talent anyway because you're now in your conference and you see the dogs starting to win a few more games.
Hey, don't forget the Doc's Diagnosis. Our final one of the week will come out tomorrow. You'll be able to find it on HuskerMax.com. You'll also be able to find it on our YouTube channel. It's brought to you by Centris Federal Credit Union. Doc draws up his analysis on the play and tells you what went right or what went wrong. We do want to thank Scott Spreitzer for joining us each and every Wednesday. If you want to connect with Scott, find him at docsports.com. You can also follow him on Twitter at Scott Wins, and you can work with Scott. Just text the word Doc Talk to 29022, and you're going to have access to a lot of important pages like Scott's daily free pick videos, as well as a page where you can sign up to get $60 in Scott's premium member-only picks. Speaking of betting, you can get a free bet with Betfred Sports. Download the Betfred Sports app today. Create a new account. Use the promo code DocTalk, and you get yourself a $20 bet in Arizona, Colorado, and Iowa. Don't forget, today's show is for entertainment purposes only. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Make sure to follow Doc Talk Sports on all the social media channels. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and like our Facebook page. Follow Dr. Rob on Twitter at Doc Talk Sports. You can follow me, Travis Justice, at Travis Creates. Before I let you go, do you guys hear the good news, by the way? Pat McAfee is going to be full-time on College Game Day on ESPN.
Nice.
It finally becomes watchable again. I mean, what they do with – I'm serious.
Wait, hold on a second. People still watch Game Day?
Because here's the deal. I get criticized on my radio show, but they trot Lee Corso up there. Like, I mean, it's like Dick Clark at the end of the the New Year's Rockin' Eve, right? I mean, Lee Corso should no longer be on television. He shouldn't. I mean, the strokes are obvious.
Love the guy.
Yes.
Same here. Yep. But you're right. I love the guy too. But yeah, it's tough to watch. You feel bad for him. I mean, I hope he's having a great time, but you can't help feeling bad for him because he can't form sentences half the time.
It's really, really bad. But McAfee will add a completely different element to that show. And you remember they had him on a couple years ago, and then they cut him off. They're like, it's like you're too wild. You're too much. But you know why people like McAfee? It's because he's a genuine dude. You listen to his show, and you're like, oh, I could hang out with this guy. I could have a beer with this guy. This is the type of guy I want to be with. And when I saw that he was going to be on Game Day full time, I'm like, finally, that show becomes watchable again. It gives me something to watch Game Day for, because I thought the Fox Big Noon Saturday show was starting to surpass Game Day. So this might be the little jolt that they need for sure. Yeah, so.
It's so much better.
It is. Do you watch those pregame shows, Scott? Or are you just too busy?
Not really.
No.
I used to get up and do that Mel Kiper show on Saturday mornings, and so I'd be flipping on and watching ESPN while I was getting ready. But I haven't for about 3 or 4 years. I did catch a few of the stuff that goes on the web where you see like Lee Corso struggling a little bit.
Yeah,
and that's why I feel bad for him. But I don't watch those shows. Although with McAfee, you got a guy who understands point spreads. Which I'm all for that when it comes to those shows. Obviously, I'm all for that. But yeah, I think it'll be better with McAfee. I like his style. I don't mind brash guys, man, if it's who they are. I'm a huge Dickie V guy. He would never remember me. I met him at Caesar's Palace many years ago. I got to show you guys real quick. I know we're running late here, but
no shit. We got all night.
I'm walking into a place called the Palm Steakhouse at Caesar's. This has been at least 12, 15 years ago at least. Dickie V sitting down at his table. He's waiting for his wife to come over, whatever, and he's doing this. And I don't know if you can see my hand, and he's moving like salt, pepper shaker here, ketchup, mustard here. He's doing all this stuff with his hands. And I'm like, this guy, and I mean this in the best way, and I love the guy, he's a freak. And he's out there and he's doing this with his hands. He's moving, he can't stay still. And
he's OCDing the table how he likes it.
Exactly. And I just went, Dickie V, and he looks over and he's, hey, how you doing, man? He's as legit as it gets. As is McAfee, and I love those kind of people. I don't care if they're brash, a little bit loud. If they are who they are, you got to like them. And I like McAfee.
It was funny. I was thinking about you before we went on the air tonight because a couple hours ago, the Roadhouse was on. Everybody loves Roadhouse, right? I mean, you got to watch Roadhouse. That's one of those remote ones where you stop and watch Roadhouse. And
you're like, yep, I'm up to 1 a.m. tonight.
Yeah, but then Casino was right after it. So Casino. It's like, God, AMC has me like hooked in. I'm like, now I got to watch. I watched Roadhouse, and I got to watch Casino. So.
That first show I ever did on a national level, well, it wasn't really national, but it was like 14 or 15 states, which is the old Stardust Racing Sportsbook show, which was called the Stardust Line. And I was 24 years old, and I started co-hosting that in 1991 and co-hosted until 1996 when I just ran out of time to do the show. The person who started that show was Lefty Rosenthal, who was Ace Rothstein, who was played by Robert De Niro. And so he started that whole show. I came along a few years later. Jim Brown, the former football player, co-hosted it before I started co-hosting it. He was with a guy named Lee Pete. So that showed a lot of history, and I ended up interviewing Lefty probably, I'm going to say 97, 98. He was in Boca Raton. Very serious dude. But we did an interview with him, and he always used to talk about, I still come to Vegas. They just don't know it. I just know how to hide. That's what he said, But yeah, what a great movie.
Excellent stuff. Scott, always a pleasure to talk to you. You have such a wealth of knowledge. We really do appreciate you doing the show with us each and every Wednesday night. Dr. Rob, from the comfort of your home, I found another camera to be able to magically appear. Thanks for everybody for watching tonight's show. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back next Wednesday, 8 o'clock sharp. If you have a certain game you'd like us to, have Scott take a look at, you can always email us during the week, and we can take a look at it. For Scott Spreitzer, for Dr. Rob Zatechka, I'm Travis Justice. We will see you next week on Behind the Point Spread.